Welcome to Core Sundays. We're taking the next 5 Sundays leading up to Underground Open, a weekend conference on February 7th and 8th. We're taking every Sunday leading up to that as a core, like if you consider Underground family, come be family with us, and we're going to talk about what we feel like God is leading us to be this year, saying to us right now, and how we are responding to it. And the invitation from God in this season for us, and what it means and what it looks like to say yes, not just as leaders, not just as microchurches, not just as missionaries, but as a citywide movement committed to one another. What this season, this time means for us, and it's a lot of what we've been as a community talking about, discerning, listening to God for the last several months and years. But we do feel like we're at, we had an all leaders meeting. Many of you were at it in December, and we do feel like our community is at a bit of an inflection point right now. And we're just trying to discern that kind of transition moment as wisely as we can, and trying to surrender all things to Jesus and say, "Do what you will. We'll do anything. Like we will experiment, try anything, or we'll shut anything down that is not your will for us in this time." And part of that is actually decreasing these spaces that we're with each other, because we feel a strong urge from the Lord to do that. And so we're going to have these 5 Sundays where our core Underground family is together. But for the rest of the year, we're going to have like 8 for the rest of the year, close to monthly, that we're gathering together in this way. And we're gonna talk a lot more about like why and what that means. But it's important for you to know that for the next 5 Sundays, we really feel a strong urge from Jesus to return to what we did before, to return to some of the practices and the postures of our movement early in the life and the birth of our movement. And what that means is returning to a more simple, primitive, listening, charismatic desperation for Jesus. And so over the next 5 weeks, I don't feel this is it's like a family meeting. It's like, "Hi, family, hi," and we don't feel any need to have the best graphics on the planet. Or hand out. We did in the yes, no, yeah. That's a good one. It's a good one. It's a good one. It's a good one. I don't feel the need to do a bunch of announcements. You guys get emails. Read them, please. If you don't, and then you miss something, don't complain to us. We sent you an email. We're not. If you're new, awesome. We're just not going to hand stuff out to you and clap or anything. It's like, welcome. So glad you're here. Hang out. Come next week too. But it's like this is a leadership meeting. We're microchurches. We're leaders of microchurches. We're the priesthood of all believers, and we just need to sit with each other, look each other in the eyes, have a little bit of a word of discernment, talk with one another, have a little bit of word of discernment about what's going on in the life of the movement right now, and then just have gobs and gobs of space, cultivated space, for us to listen to Jesus as leaders, listen to Jesus as communities, listen to Jesus as missionaries, and respond however he is leading us to respond, both individually and communally, corporately. So we're just going to set, the next 5 weeks are going to be they're going to feel very different, but we're really just trying to create space, set a table for all of us, myself included as a microchurch leader, to listen to Jesus as a community, as a broader movement, and say, "God, do what you will. Do what you will with me right now. Do what you will with our community. Do what you will with our movement. We're here. We're listening." And so, in terms of order of service, it's just going to feel very different. This week we're talking about renewal, and we're going to be thinking a little bit about revival. We're going to be thinking a little bit about our time that we're in, and the perspective that we have of the time that we're in. And so this week we're going to talk a little bit about renewal, and then we're going to have an open time to open ourselves up to Jesus and what he has for us. And next week is going to be an extended prayer room of some of what we talk about this week. And then we're going to have 2 weeks where we talk about being a remnant people in response to renewal. Like we are being renewed by God, set apart by him in holiness and calling and vocation. And he is actually then unifying us as a remnant people, a people who are a little weird, a people who are a little strange, set apart, white-hot faith, fiery people who do not taste like the world. They do not look like the world. They do not smell like the world. They are an affront to the world's way and order. And we'll have 2 weeks to wrestle with that together, talk about that together, respond, pray, have an extended prayer room about that. And then we're going to have 2 weeks to talk about once we've become like a remnant, we've been renewed by God, we're committing to be a remnant, strange people. What God does with remnant people is spark the seeds of revival in the neighborhood, in the city, in the workplace, in the region, in the country. And it might even be revival that we will never see in our lifetime, but we will pray for it anyways. And we will commit ourselves to it anyways, even if the people later on, other generations, are the ones who taste it, see it. We don't care. We contend for it. We contend for God's presence and renewal. So just give me like 20, 25 minutes. I have 1 page less of notes than I usually do, okay? I promise you. Just give me a little time and lean in with me this morning. Lean in. I'm going to have you talk with one another. You know, we just got to get through some of that. Like it's Sunday morning. I'm tired. We just got to get through that with each other. Can we do that? Can we lean in and push with each other? I want to consider just for a minute. I want to do a little exercise where we consider our perspective of reality, and how perspective, like our eyes, how perspective informs how we respond to the reality that we see. So I'm going to put up a series of images, and I want you to actually get with like two, 3 people. It could just be like somebody next to you or 2 people next to you. And I want you to talk about what you think you're seeing. What is this that you think you're seeing? I'm literally just going to give you like 15, 20 seconds. So it's got to be quick. You can't have like an existential dialogue about what you think you're seeing. It's going to be quick, okay? So let's do the first one. I'll show you an image, and you talk with the person next to you about what you think you're seeing. Just take like 15, 20 seconds. Get with the person next to you. What do you think you're seeing? Okay, just say it out loud. What do you think it is? Okay, what do you guys think back there? Okay, somebody in the very back. What did you say? Did you say diabetes? Pre-diabetes. Fire pit. I heard a couple people in the back say auditorium, I think. Yeah. Like a cathedral. Something like that, like a roof, an ordained roof. I think it's really interesting. It's actually entirely made out of 1,300 cookies. Now here's what's interesting. The people in front who are closer to it, they're like, that's an Oreo. Somebody over here said, that's an Oreo. That looks delicious. And some of the people in the back who you have a different perspective. The people who are further away, you're seeing it from a different perspective. You're like, maybe a cathedral, maybe an auditorium, maybe something like that. Now, some people cheated and they came up here and looked at it and they said diabetes, but 1,300 cookies pieced together in that particular way. What's the next one? Let's see the next one. What do you think that is? Talk about it. What do you think that is? Talk with somebody. What do you think? Tell me what it is. Computer chip? What did you say? Balconies? Photoshopped balconies. Computer chip. What did you say? Yeah, like an urban apartment complex. What other people say? The Matrix. Sure, of course. Yeah. Star Wars ship. High probability. Yeah, high probability. Inception. Inception. It is a screenshot of Inception. Yes. So different people, different perspectives, whether you're near or far, looking at it from different angles, and you're interpreting it through your own like kind of lens of what you think that might be. It is, in fact, someone standing in this is a real picture of somebody standing in a courtyard looking up through an apartment complex and taking a picture. So it is balconies. It's an apartment complex. But 70% of people who look at this picture think it is a computer chip. So well done. Well done. Well done. Next one. What is that? Take a minute, talk with somebody next to you. What do you think that is?
Red tide.
What do you think that is? Thanks, man.
Do you need an marker?
Thank you.
That's the best one I found.
Awesome.
Sucks.
That's not bad. Okay. No, that's good. That's good. Okay, what do you think? Dirt with filters. Salmon. Who said fish over there? Other people. What did you think? Star Wars. You have more scenes from movies. Yes. What did you say over here? Bob Ross painting. Happy trees. Happy trees. Happy trees. It's happy trees. A mountain in the background. Anybody else? This is a close-up. This was impressive, a couple of you. This is a close-up of a raw fish on sushi. This is a close-up of a fillet of a fish on sushi. Next one. Last one. This is the last one. All right, take some guesses. Talk with each other. Talk with each other. What do you think it is? Okay, say it out loud. Just a few people. Go ahead. Upside down what?
In the ocean.
Upside down in the ocean. Somebody said glacier? Who else? Marshmallows. Delicious. Pre-diabetes again. This is an iceberg, so close. This is an iceberg. It's an iceberg. Now I'm gonna ask you to share with the same people you've been talking with about icebergs and cookies and cathedrals. I'm going to ask you to potentially share something that might be more vulnerable. See, you know, our perspective on a thing changes the way that we feel about it. How we feel about it changes the way we respond to it. You know, when you looked at the picture with the red and the white mountains in the back, you might have thought, is that like a bloody ocean or something like that? And if that was your perspective, you would feel a sense of disgust. It's gross. What is this? But then if you like sushi and you realize it's like a fillet, like a raw fillet about to be put on sushi, suddenly you're like, I'm hungry for lunch. What is this? How you feel about it is completely different depending on your perspective of it. The cathedral, you're kind of in awe of great architecture. And then you realize it's Oreos and you're like, I'm hungry for lunch. Yeah, again, I'm hungry for lunch. And I want to go to lunch right now, you know. Can you think of a time, and the person among you who's like quickest to think of one, I just go ahead and share. Can you think of a time when your perspective of something was off? And you've realized that now. a time when you thought something in your life, either like a moment or experience or something like that, when you thought a moment was bad and it turned out to be for your good. Or a moment or experience or like an emotional process, something that you thought was great, and in hindsight you've realized it was destructive. It's very destructive. And your perspective has changed. Can you just talk with the people next to you about that? Some of you are thinking, like, the moment I said those two sentences, you're like, yep, no one. And just talk about that with each other for a minute, and then I'll break back in. Go ahead. Go ahead and finish up. We'll jump in. Our perspective of our experiences, our relationships, our perspective of ourselves, our perspective of God, perspective of what He's up to is immeasurably important to how we live, what we do, how we feel, how we respond to how we feel. And I won't go into great depth, but like many of you, I think one of the perceived highest moments of my life was actually the lowest. And one of the perceived lowest moments of my life, in hindsight, was perhaps the highest. On a Wednesday afternoon, I received the award as the Junior Citizen of the Year as a senior in high school in my little small town. I was in the paper on Friday shaking the mayor's hand with my little plaque, Junior Citizen of the Year, for all my volunteer efforts. And I had alcohol poisoning on Saturday, and I got in trouble for stealing 13 bottles of alcohol from a liquor store. 24-hour turnaround. I had this high point in my life where I was like, look at me, look at what all I've done. The moment you hit some peak or high point without God, you're in trouble. And in hindsight, for years, I thought, being in that space of having the rug ripped out from under my life was like, where is God in this? What is He doing? There is no God. He's certainly not loving. Certainly doesn't care. And now, with perspective, realizing that was the best, it was the most loving, most rooted in grace moment of my life for Him to wake me up. I just finished watching a 4-part kind of docu-series on the nuclear disaster at Chernobyl. Did anybody else watch that? On HBO. It's on HBO. It's like 4-part miniseries on this nuclear disaster that happened in Chernobyl. It's called Chernobyl, if you want to go find it. If you want to go find it. April of 1986, the worst nuclear disaster in history occurred when the number 4 nuclear reactor core at the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl exploded and was wide open on fire, spewing nuclear high-level radiation materials all over the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. That plume of radioactive material was poisoning Eastern Europe for 9 days before they got it under control. And when a nuclear reactor core is open and exposed in an explosion like that, what you need to do immediately when that happens, what you need to do is evacuate everyone. Run away. Evacuate the town, evacuate the region, evacuate the state. Get out of there. And then you got to kind of sit back, and the people who are experts need to strategically decide how to deal with this problem with the least amount of human loss. But you got to send some people in there to do some stuff, and the people who get sent in there are basically agreeing to a capped lifespan in order to help the greater good. But in the immediate aftermath of the explosion, every single employee, manager, supervisor, engineer, political people in political positions in that area, in that town, in that region, and everybody else were refused to believe that the reactor core had exploded. And they instead chose to believe that it was a they felt the explosion, and they decided, they chose to believe in contrary to all the evidence that was in front of them, that it was some mechanical failure and it was like an electrical fire and it caused like a little bit of disruption. But certainly the nuclear core was not exposed and was not damaged. No way. There's no way that happens. And they had reason to believe there's no way that happens because something like that had not happened. So they were biased to believe this could not happen. It would not happen. And they decided not even to consider it. And they chose that it was like a mechanical fire. So if a reactor core is open, which it was wide open, what you do is you run away, you evacuate everyone, and you don't treat it like a fire. The worst thing you can do is spray it with water. Because all of the water you're spraying on it is contaminating the water sources everywhere else. That water's going somewhere and it's completely infected now with radiation. And water actually won't put out the fire, no matter how much you put on it. You got to put boron and sand on it. I'm ruining the documentary for you. Boron and sand. Spoiler alert. Boron and sand. But because they refused to consider that possibility, and they chose to believe that it was just a mechanical fire, they sent 138 first responders immediately to it. And they locked down the town and refused to let anyone leave because they didn't want to cause an unnecessary stir. They literally locked down the town and sent 138 first responders directly to the power plant and started dousing it with water. So many of those first responders did not make it past a week, 2 weeks, a month. Water source contaminated, so many people in that village. To this day, they just built like a structure around that site, like a big massive structure around that site. They just finished it in 2017. That's how recent this was. They still do not know the full human costs of that nuclear accident. The estimates of the amount of deaths are between 4,000 and 96,000. That's how much they don't know. They don't know. Maybe. But they just did not want to believe the reactor core was compromised, and they were biased not to believe it. Because if that was true, they were all in trouble. They were all in trouble. They were biased not to believe it. See, if we misread reality, we could run away from good and run toward evil. We could run away from life and health and vitality and run toward death and destruction. If we misread reality, if we don't have a critical and wise eye, if we do not ask the Lord for wisdom, for a perspective completely informed by Him, we will start to call the truth lies and the lies truth. And we will run straight for Chernobyl. Your perception of reality informs how you feel, how you respond to how you feel. And there is a lot to think critically about in our time, these days, what God is up to. In our space, in our context, in our city. And how are we to respond to it? In October of 2019, the Week online news company posted a well-researched article that was titled "The Coming End of Christian America." It was based on a Pew research that was done earlier in October. And they wrote, as that new research report unsparingly explains, the decline of Christianity in the United States continues at a rapid pace. In September of 2019, The Atlantic posted an article titled "How America Lost Its Religion," citing a rapid decline in religious ideological influence in every identifiable human domain. In November of 2019, the Baptist News Global. Baptist, I said. I don't know if you heard that. They wrote, "The Death of Christianity in the U.S." was the title of their article in November 2019. See, we all feel like something is wrong. It's not just us here sitting here in Tampa, Florida. It's not something on the East Coast or on the West Coast or in the center. Everybody feels like something's wrong. Something is declining, something's breaking, something's different about this. I mean, there's been bad studies for decades, but there's something different about this. Sometimes our perception in times like this our perception is critically important. And sometimes when we read articles like this, we see people talking about this. Social media has exacerbated this, but our perception can be something like, and we've talked about this in a few other spaces. It can be something like, at some point, there's time and, Christian vitality is what we'll call it. And it's sometime in the road, like early, Jesus is not around, this is really low, and then at some point there's like this massive revival, and Western culture is like a Christian utopia or something like that. And we can feel when we read all the, we've gone through the last 10 or 15 years of news cycles and reports and statistics, all this stuff. We can actually start to feel like, maybe back in the medieval ages or Constantine or something like that, Christianity was like at some kind of apex in vitality and health. And ever since then, it's just been declining. It's just on a constant, unbreaking decline. That can be how we can perceive. This is important. I'm going to keep using the word perception. That's how we can actually perceive what we're seeing. And if that's what you perceive, this unending, unslowable, inevitable decline into death, how you feel about that will be a certain way. How you respond to that perception will be a certain way. And how do you respond to that? You just hunker down? Yeah, you get defensive. You try to grab for every ounce of power you can get. You hold on to it as long as you can. You let the world go to hell in a handbasket, and you just say, let's just do what we can in here. Everybody, like face to face. Let's hold it in. A lot of fear, not a whole lot of hope. Your hope is in Revelation, but not in anything now. He's going to come. He's going to burn it all down. But until then, let's just hold it together. But what if I were to tell you, if you actually look at history, like an evidence-based view of history, this isn't real. What you can perceive from some of the things, the articles that you might read or some of the things you see, is what you perceive about that is not real. What's more true of the history of Christian vitality, it looks a little bit more like this. Right. So it's like constant, like up and down, small ups, and just a steep decline, and then massive, and then small, and then up. And if you study the history of Christian revivals and Christian movements over time, and do cultural analysis and think through the decline of a Christian worldview or the persecution of a Christian worldview, it looks much more like this. The main variable that determines societal decline and societal revival, if we were to try to look at this and think, okay, based on evidence and based on history, this is what it's like, it's probably important for us to maybe do some consideration. What happens here? What happens here? What happens here? What happened here? How did this happen? And if you look at history, the driving factor that determines turning down or turning up is God's presence. This is why sometimes you would think you thought the highest moment of your life, sometimes the highest moment of your life is actually the most dangerous. Sometimes some of the peak moments of Christian history become the most dangerous because they are the most tempted to trade away the presence of God for their own sufficiency. Their own life without God. They're capable, they're strong, they're wise. Our institutions are working, our ideas are great. And the moment that God's glory, God's renown, dependence on God, God's presence is traded away for our own selves, our own sufficiency, our own ideas, you're dead in the water. And what turns it around eventually is some remnant of God's people who start to remember, our ideas are dumb. Our institutions are weak. Yeah, our institutions are weak. We're so flawed. I'm personally so broken and sinful. Oh yeah, our best righteous deeds are like filthy rags before him. That's in the Bible too. And he and his presence are all we got, really. He's all we need. He's all we want. He's all we got. He's our only hope. He's the world's only hope. He's my only hope. And they, in that space of conviction and confession and repentance, and then becoming a strange people who are hungry for nothing else but God's redemptive presence among them, among their city, among the world, and just contending for God to come in every way, in every space, in every time. Begging for it, clamoring for it, fasting for it, praying for it, seeking it, running after it. That's when suddenly renewal starts to come. I think this is the prophetic word we see delivered in the Ephesian church in Revelation, when in Revelation 1, when there's like prophetic words coming to some of these 7 churches. And the Ephesians get this word, and our leadership community has kind of discerned, like, I think this is a word for us, and we need to receive it. We need to receive it personally. We need to receive it as a community. Jesus says to the Ephesian church, I know your deeds, your hard work, your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and you have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardship for my name and have not grown weary. And yet I hold this against you, that you have forsaken the love that you had at first. Consider how far you have fallen. Repent and do the things you did at first. If you do not repent, I will come to you and remove your lampstand from that place. It's a hard word. And there's a lot of you who don't know what we did at first, so I'd like to tell you. You know, if you're, because this pattern of kind of like renewal and revival and then decline is not just true of Western Christian culture, it's not just true of global Christian culture, it's true of our own movement. And some of you are new in the last couple of years. Some of you are new this year. Some of you just walked in today. Welcome. So glad you're here. And you might not fully understand what I'm talking about. You might be like, what's going on? I love this place. This is great. This is awesome. And bless you. Hold on to that. I'm not asking you to give it away. I'm saying have a great, have like high energy, be hungry for God, be an amazing missionary, think the best of this community. Don't change your opinion. That's fine. But for those of us who have been around a while, and those of you who've been around since the very beginning, Um, some of you are OG, you've been here since the very beginning. Some of you maybe came in 7, 8, 9 years ago and you felt something change. See, before this was ever called the underground, before we ever had a name, before we ever had bank accounts or a logo or a website, this was just a people of God who gathered in living rooms and rented sanctuaries to pray and to weep. That's all it was. It was a people united by a common desperation for God to come and for the kingdom to come in this city. And anyway, in any place, among any people. It was a people who did not care at all, actually, about microchurches or about the underground. It was a people who would have taken great pleasure in the kingdom of God coming to attractional churches, even prosperity preachers, did not care as long as it came. It was a people who would gather anywhere and everywhere for whatever duration of time, for however long necessary, to contend for God to come, to beg for the kingdom to come, to stand in the gap for this city, to intercede, to call out idols, to contest their strength, to claim God's authority and majesty over all competing voices and entities. And guys, it's so subtle. I don't even think any of us could identify where. It's so subtle. It's so tricky. But at some point, our trust in our own ideas and our strategies and our programs and our own strength and wisdom displaced our singular hunger for God's presence. And some of you still have that hunger, and you don't know anything I'm talking about. Hang on to it. That's fine. Hang on to it. And in the lack of our hunger for our singular, fiery, uncompromising hunger for God's presence, in the lack of that hunger, we've grown too friendly with the world. We've made certain truces and peace treaties with Babylon. We've run straight into Chernobyl, and we brought water hoses. And we haven't just been ineffective in what God has called us to do. We've been poisoned in the doing of it. But there's good news here. There's very good news here. Because the history of God's revivalist pattern, the history of God's renewal,
you see what happens, I guess. And eventually these small tent meetings grew into crowds of thousands. And these crowds ended up sparking what became this great Wales revival, which sparked a movement of holiness all the way throughout Wales. And a movement of seeking and hungering and desperate for the Spirit's manifest power in time and space among one another. That guy must have had some good sermons. Get like a little tent of people to eventually grow to like almost every day having these massive crowds of thousands of people. You want to know what the content of those sermons was? These great sermons. He didn't talk about an HBO docuseries, I tell you that. I mean, he didn't have great sociological experiments to talk about. He didn't quote all the best books of the time. He had 4 points to every sermon. You must put away any unconfessed sin. If you have in this room an unconfessed sin, you put it out of your body. You put it out. You snuff it out. Get rid of it. You must put away any doubtful habit. What he meant by that is if there's anything that you do right now that you have not heard the Lord say you should do that, but you're not sure if the Lord said don't do that. You're not sure about that habit that you have, that thing that you watch, or that language that you have, or that thing that you drink, or that place that you go, those people you hang out with. You don't know if God is for it or against it. It's a little bit doubtful. He said, put it away. Anything you're not sure about, stop. Stop it. You must put away any doubtful habit, and you must obey the Spirit promptly. Whatever you hear the Spirit of God say, you do it right away. Do not wait a moment. You respond to the Spirit promptly. And you must confess Christ publicly. Those are the 4 points every sermon. Renewal moments in history always began with conviction, radical acts of personal confession and repentance, idols confessed and destroyed, and a full divestment from the world and its values and its virtues and its narrative. A full divestment from the enemy and his schemes, a full divestment from our own flesh, sin and darkness. The worship team would come up. We're just going to have like an extended space this morning. This is a prayer room. You came in this morning and engaged the prayer room. You prepared your hearts. You wrestled with some texts. You opened yourself up to Jesus. Said, come do what you will this morning. And now we're just going to have an extended space in response in a corporate prayer room. And guys, I understand sitting in a theater like this, in a stage, and you've got cushy seats, you might be tricked into thinking that you came here to consume something. You came here to be entertained. You came here to spectate. That is not what this is. It's a place to engage. It's a place to dive in, every single one of us. To enter in. And not in a way that anybody can inform for you. It's a way to enter into what God is saying, what God is doing in you. See, the renewal we hunger for, the turn of the tide, it hinges on confession and repentance. Who needs to pray for revival in the city when we are unconcerned with being revived ourselves? We must be revived. I must be revived. I must confess. I must repent. I must identify and name every way in which I have thought myself sufficient without God. And say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. And we don't even deserve you to come. We don't deserve you to even hear these prayers. We tear our clothes before you. Sackcloth and ashes. That's the beginning of renewal. It starts with us. Arthur Wallace, in his book, The Radical Christian, which sparked a movement in the UK, a movement of house churches, he said, sin must be discovered and exposed to the light of his coming. It is time to cease excusing our sins by calling them shortcomings or natural weaknesses, or by attributing them to our temperament or our environment. It is time to cease justifying our carnal ways and our materialistic outlook by pointing and comparing ourselves to others who are the same. And those words are what spark the Bible. That we would be renewed, that we would confess, that we would be laid open by God's conviction, that we would say, Spirit of God, come, not to comfort me, but to convict me of truth and righteousness. Come now, I must have it. We have forsaken the love we had at first. Consider how far we have fallen. We must repent and do the things we did at first. And we want to give you space this morning to open yourself up to the Spirit's evaluation of our lives. To say, God, search my heart, O God. And whatever you put your finger on, Jesus, whatever you expose, I will no longer hide it away in the dark crevices of my heart, but I'll bring it to the light. I'll see it. I'll name it. And I'll say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Space for Jesus to expose. Space for us to be attentive to Him and to be quick to respond. The renewal we seek, it needs a remnant. It needs a crazy people. It needs a people set apart by holiness, established in His love. It doesn't need a sermon. It doesn't need a great program. It needs a people set apart in strange holiness. We want to hear from Jesus. We want to listen to His voice. We want to respond. We want to receive His conviction. We want to receive what He has for us. And so we've set up a lot because we don't want to actually be prescriptive of what Jesus is going to lead you to do. So we've just set up a bunch of stuff. We've got the chalkboard already. If you want to, and on your paper we kind of tried to describe all these prayer elements that we've set up. We got the chalkboard ready in case you feel like you just need to write your prayers. You need to see them. You need to say them. You need to put them in public. You know, we put communion out. We're going to take communion in a few minutes, and that's going to be like it's going to be like, come when you're ready. Come when you're ready. And we'll get that ready in a few minutes. And we even set out some, instead of passing the plate, we're setting out giving boxes. Instead of making it like a liturgical moment, it's a prayer room moment. Opening to the conviction of the Spirit. And if you feel like it's appropriate for you to respond by divesting and growing in the grace of generosity, stepping away from the idols of materialism and consumption and individualism, and actually in an act of worship, in an act of response to the voice of Jesus doing that. We've created a whole lot of room. We got rid of the chairs over there on the side. We tried to create as much space up here as we could for you to just kneel or lay or dance or walk or pace or lay prostrate, whatever you need to do. We've designed a prayer room space for you to be able to respond to the Lord, to listen to Him, to pray the Scriptures, to pray them to yourself, or to pray them out loud. To beg God to come. To confess and repent, say, I'm sorry. And would you come? We need you. You're all we need, actually. You're it. You're all of it. So we're gonna enter into that space. We're gonna invite you into that space. So I'm just asking for this first song, God, would you let this song be a prayer? And would you sit, would you stand, would you kneel, would you walk, and would you just open yourselves up and just echo this song? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Hunger for His presence. And as soon as you feel like the Lord is leading you to respond, do it. Don't look to your right or to your left. Who cares? You have permission. You don't need social permission. You have permission to respond to Jesus in this space. How does he need to respond? God, we sit and we wait for you. We sit and we wait for you. We wait for you to reveal. We wait for you to expose. We invite your Spirit into this room, God. We invite you to come in manifest power. God, we know you're here, but we're asking you to come in manifest power through conviction. And there's even stuff in me, there's stuff in us that's unconfessed because we don't even know it. God, bring it to us. Bring it to us. We will not turn away this morning, God, from the mirror. Bring the mirror. Because we know we can trust you. If it was any other mirror, if it was anyone else holding the mirror, we might not be able to trust it, but because it's you holding the mirror, God, we can trust it. We can trust it. Because we know you're not surprised by any of it. You already died for it. You bled for it. You've already got mercy ready for it. You've got abounding grace ready for it. So God, bring us the